What if you were given a choice to choose your own mother, in front of strangers, under a chandelier, in a palace, but the only person you wanted wasn't even meant to be there? That's exactly what happened in the lavish home of billionaire entrepreneur Harrison Vale. A man so wealthy, he once bought a vineyard just because the air smelled expensive. But this story isn't about wine or wealth. It's about a 6-year-old boy and a decision that shook the pillars of power, pride, and perception. The crystal chandelier above the grand dining hall sparkled like frozen lightning, raining quiet tension down on the polished marble floor. Gilded statues lined the corners of the Vale Estate's east wing, a ballroom so silent even the walls seemed to be holding their breath. Standing center stage was Harrison Vale, early 50s, white, powerful, always pristine in his tailored royal blue Brioni suit. He stood like a painting, arms behind his back, lips taut, gaze fixed on his only son, Leo Vale. Leo, 6 years old, blonde hair combed to the side, wore a miniature tuxedo that somehow made him look smaller than he already was. His tiny hands clenched tightly at his sides. And to Harrison's left and right, two women, both hand-picked, both dazzling in the way magazines trained us to believe meant motherly. Melina, the icy platinum blonde in a satin-red gown that clung like ambition. Tatiana, a raven-haired stunner with cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass and a crimson silk dress that dripped confidence. They weren't here by accident. They were summoned. Harrison turned to his son with a voice rehearsed but hollow. "Leo, it's time." The boy didn't respond. "Your nanny leaves next week. It's time you have a mother, a proper one." He motioned to the two models flanking him like trophies. "One of these women will be your new stepmother. Choose." It was the kind of statement that shouldn't exist. A child choosing a parent like picking a toy from a shelf. But that's the kind of world the rich sometimes live in, where choices are decorum, not emotion. Leo's eyes moved slowly, past the women, past the velvet drapes, and then he saw her, Amara, the black maid, mid-30s, quiet, composed, humble. She wore her usual white apron over a simple black blouse, hair neatly pinned, a cleaning cloth still tucked in her hand. She wasn't meant to be there. She'd only come to wipe a mirror in the hallway when she heard voices. But now she stood behind the models, frozen, wide-eyed, like a shadow that accidentally stepped into the spotlight. Leo looked at her, then at the two women, then back to his father. And what he said next didn't just shatter the silence. It shattered the room. "I don't want either of them," he said, voice trembling but clear. Harrison blinked. He frowned as if someone had misread a script. "What did you say?" Leo stepped forward, right past the two models' designer shoes. "I want her," he said louder, pointing straight at Amara. "I want Amara to be my mom." Melina let out a short, insulting laugh. Tatiana raised an eyebrow in disgust. Harrison's face went blank. A man who had controlled boardrooms, elections, and market crashes, suddenly disarmed by a child's honesty. Amara froze. "Leo, no. Sweetheart, She tried to stop him, but Leo's voice was louder now, more alive. "She tucks me in. She makes the pancakes the way I like. She reads me stories and uses all the voices. When I had the fever last month, she stayed up and held me all night." He turned to Melina. "You don't even know what my favorite color is." Melina flinched. Tatiana looked away. "You only smiled at me when Dad was watching," Leo continued. "She smiles at me even when no one's looking." Harrison's jaw was clenched now. "Leo, that's enough." But the boy wasn't done. "Number you don't know either. You leave every morning before I wake up. You come home after I'm asleep. You missed my last birthday, Dad." His voice cracked. The room was frozen. Staff behind the curtain stopped breathing. Even the marble seemed to weep. Amara lowered her head, heart thudding so loud she feared they could hear it. Leo took a deep breath. "I never asked for another mom, but Amara stayed. Even when I threw things, even when I lied, she never left." Tears welled in his eyes. "She loves me. That's what moms do." The two models exchanged glances, their posture faltering like dropped mannequins. Melina scoffed, backing away. I wasn't told this was an audition, she muttered. Tatiana crossed her arms, rolled her eyes, and turned to the door. Neither waited for permission to leave, and no one tried to stop them, because no one cared anymore. All eyes were on the maid. All eyes were on the boy. And finally, all eyes turned to Harrison Vale. But for the first time, Harrison wasn't looking back. He was staring at Amara. Really staring. Not at her uniform, not at her position, but at the woman who had held his son through storms he never noticed. The woman who taught love without lectures, loyalty without conditions. Amara tried to retreat. Mr. Vale, I would never. I asked him to choose, Harrison said quietly, almost to himself. Leo ran to Amara and hugged her waist. She trembled, slowly bending to hold him close. The cloth dropped from her hand. Her eyes blinked fast as if suppressing years of tears. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not in a billionaire's estate, not in a ballroom, not like this. But there they were. A boy, a maid, and a truth money could never buy. Harrison finally moved. One step forward. Leo turned and looked up. Are you mad? He asked. The billionaire, once feared, once flawless, slowly shook his head. No, son, Harrison said, his voice cracked for the first time in decades. I'm ashamed. The words dropped like thunder, but this time it wasn't Leo trembling. It was the father. I think the most powerful moments in stories like this are the ones that break social expectations in seconds. When a child, untouched by status, speaks truth to privilege. And what I love most here is how Leo isn't dramatic for drama's sake. He's just honest. That kind of truth, it pierces deeper than any grand gesture, especially in a world obsessed with appearances. The grand hall had emptied. The echo of heels against marble faded into nothing. The crystal chandelier still sparkled above like nothing had changed, but everything had. Harrison Vale, the billionaire whose name could open doors in any country, now stood in front of the woman who had raised his son in silence. His posture had softened. His shoulders, once held high with pride, slouched with something unfamiliar. Regret. Amara was still on her knees, Leo wrapped tightly in her arms. And for a long, stretching moment, no one said a word. Then Harrison knelt. This man who hadn't bowed to a soul in years now found himself crouched beside a maid. A woman he'd passed 100 times in the hallway without a second glance. He smoothed his jacket without thinking, then looked at Leo. I asked you to choose a mother, he said quietly, but I realize now, I was asking you to choose someone to fit into my world. My image, not yours. Leo blinked. Amara didn't dare move. You chose someone who fits into your heart, and I can't argue with that. Amara finally looked up, confused, cautious. Mr. Vale, I never intended to cause. You didn't cause anything, Harrison interrupted. I did. The silence held them again. Then Leo spoke, still clutching Amara. Dad, are you mad she stayed? Harrison's gaze softened further. I'm grateful. Those words, grateful, sounded foreign in the billionaire's mouth, but genuine. He turned to Amara now. You've done more for my son than I ever have. You've given him stability, warmth, a reason to smile, and I gave him bodyguards and tutors. Amara's lips trembled. I just wanted him to feel safe. And he did. Because of you. Behind them, some of the staff had gathered quietly in the hallway, peeking through the archway. Not to gossip, but to witness something no one expected. Their employer apologizing. Harrison stood slowly and offered his hand. Amara, will you stay? Not as staff, not as a maid, but as part of this family? The words made her heart stutter. I don't understand, she whispered. Leo already sees you as his mother, he said, and I trust his judgment more than my own. I'm not asking for anything romantic or complicated. I'm asking you to stay because this house is no longer a home without you in it. Amara blinked, stunned. Leo looked up at her, eyes hopeful. Please say yes someday, he whispered. She held his tiny hand, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. Then don't, Harrison replied softly. You've already said everything. By loving him when I didn't know how. That evening, everything was quiet. But it wasn't the cold quiet of a palace. It was the soft, warm quiet of a home. The kind where you can hear the hum of bedtime stories through the walls and the occasional sleepy giggle from a child's room. Harrison passed by Leo's open door. Inside, Amara sat on the floor, reading from a storybook. Leo was tucked under a blanket, fingers loosely curled around hers. His breathing slowed as he slipped into sleep. Harrison didn't speak. He didn't enter. He simply stood there, in the hallway of his own home, watching something money had never been able to buy. Peace. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a man living in a mansion. He felt like a father coming home. What strikes me most here is how hard it is for powerful people to admit they were wrong, especially in front of someone they once overlooked. Harrison's kneeling is more than a physical gesture. It's a symbolic one. A man who ruled empires bowed, not out of defeat, but out of awakening. That's real character growth, and it's rare. Days passed, then a week. The veil estate adjusted in quiet ways. Amara no longer wore her maid uniform. The apron was gone. So was the cleaning cloth. She still rose early. Old habits don't die easy. But now instead of polishing glassware, she made breakfast with Leo, talking about dreams and cartoons and pancakes. At first, some staff didn't know how to treat her. Was she one of them, or something else now? But all it took was one look from Leo, clutching her hand at the breakfast table, and the entire hierarchy of the mansion rearranged itself without a word. She wasn't the maid anymore. She was Leo's mom. Maybe not on paper, but in every way that mattered. Harrison had started to change too, slowly, awkwardly, but intentionally. He began eating breakfast at the same table. He showed up for Leo's bedtime, even if only to listen. He even asked Amara once if she'd teach him how to make those pancakes that Leo loved. She laughed. "You cook?" she teased. "Let's call it evolution," he grinned. But beneath the smiles there was hesitation. The media hadn't found out, yet. But Harrison knew they would. And what would they say? That the billionaire was co-parenting with a former maid? Would his image suffer? Would the board raise eyebrows? He sat in his office one night, swirling bourbon, staring at a framed article on his desk. Harrison Vale, man of the future. He turned the frame face down, because the future he wanted now wasn't one built on perception. It was one built on presence. Meanwhile, Amara faced her own inner storm. She never imagined being part of something so big, so public, so fragile. What if Leo changed his mind? What if Harrison did? What if she said yes? And everything fell apart. She remembered her own childhood, group homes, foster care, temporary love, promises that didn't last. And she looked at Leo, so full of faith, and wondered if she was strong enough to be what he needed, forever. 2 weeks after the ballroom incident, Harrison stood in the kitchen in jeans. Actual jeans. The staff nearly fainted. He held a small box in one hand. Leo ran to Amara in the garden. "He has a surprise," he yelled. She raised an eyebrow. "A surprise?" "Yep, but you gotta come inside." She followed, unsure what to expect. Inside, Harrison was pacing. When he saw her, he smiled nervously. "Okay, this might be the most unorthodox thing I've ever done, but I've done hostile takeovers of billion-dollar firms. I think I can handle this." He handed her the box. Amara opened it. Inside was a delicate gold necklace and a ring. Not an engagement ring, but a signet, engraved with the Vale family crest. And on the inside, "You've already been everything he needed. This is just to make it official." She gasped. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Harrison said. "Someday when you're ready. No rush, no pressure." Leo tugged her hand. "Say yes now," he whispered, then giggled. Amara blinked back tears. "Can I think about it?" "Of course," Harrison smiled. "But just know, there's no Vale family without you." Later that night, Amara sat in the nursery while Leo slept. She held the box in her lap, and she finally let the tears fall. Because all her life, she had been temporary, a helper, a backup. But now, someone was telling her she was the story. Not the side character, the mother. And maybe, just maybe, she could finally believe it. 3 months later, a quiet backyard ceremony, no paparazzi, no designer gowns, just Leo in a bow tie, Harrison in a gray suit, and Amara in a simple white dress. She never said yes in a grand speech. She just showed up. And sometimes that's all the yes the world needs. They exchanged vows, not of romance, but of commitment, of parenting, of choosing each other again and again. Leo carried the rings. His eyes sparkled like the chandelier that started it all. And when Harrison said, "Do you promise to be the mother you've already been?" Amara smiled and whispered, "I already am." I love that this story doesn't end with a fairy tale romance. It ends with something stronger, a choice, a healing, a boy who followed love, and adults who followed him back to it. It reminds me that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply stay. Because love doesn't always arrive in a limo. Sometimes it walks in quietly, carrying a bedtime story,